Josh Cooper navigated the late afternoon traffic, the sun casting long shadows from the skyscrapers downtown. The sky held a hazy orange tint, a beautiful, if somewhat melancholic, backdrop to his daily commute. He worked as a software developer for a burgeoning tech company, a small cog in a massive machine of innovation. He enjoyed his work, the challenge of solving complex problems with lines of code. It was a creative outlet that paid the bills, allowing him to live comfortably in a modest apartment just outside the city center. Today, however, his mind wasn't on algorithms or debugging. He was thinking about dinner, maybe grilling some salmon he'd picked up over the weekend. His gas gauge blinked insistently, a small, annoying reminder of an impending task. He'd been putting it off for a couple of days, hoping to make it to his usual gas station closer to home, the one with slightly cheaper prices and a consistently working air pump. But the needle was dipping dangerously close to empty, forcing a detour. He sighed, resigned to the inconvenience. Pulling into the brightly lit gas station, he selected an open pump and killed the engine. The familiar scent of gasoline immediately filled the air. He grabbed his wallet and headed towards the pump, mentally calculating how much he needed to fill up. He wasn't aiming for a full tank, just enough to get him through the next few days. The automated voice from the pump blared out instructions, a robotic drone cutting through the ambient noise of passing cars and idling engines. Josh inserted his card, selected his grade of gas, and began filling his tank. He leaned against his car, scrolling through his phone, quickly scanning news headlines and checking his social media notifications. He didn't linger, aware of the small annoyance of using a pump during peak hours. He topped off the tank until the pump clicked off automatically, then carefully removed the nozzle and replaced it. Before heading inside to pay, he made a quick mental note to grab a bottle of water. The afternoon heat had left him parched. Leaving the doors unlocked for just a moment seemed harmless enough, and he casually walked towards the brightly lit minimart attached to the gas station, completely oblivious to the drama that was about to unfold. The day had started as a normal, routine Monday, but by the time he left the gas station, his perception of the city, and perhaps the world, would be irrevocably altered. The mundane task of filling his car would become a stark reminder of the racial tensions simmering beneath the surface of everyday life. As Josh strolled into the brightly lit minimart, a large, blonde woman, later identified as Karen Crawford, pulled up beside his car in a beat-up minivan with faded paint and a missing hubcap. She eyed his car, a relatively new, well-maintained sedan, with a mixture of disdain and avarice. Karen had been having a rough day. Her unemployment checks were barely enough to cover rent and the rising cost of groceries, let alone gasoline. Pride had long since been swallowed by desperation. Seeing Josh, a young black man, casually filling his tank while she struggled just to stay afloat ignited a spark of resentment within her. She glanced around, noticing that Josh was inside the minimart and the other patrons were preoccupied. The gas attendant was behind the counter, engrossed in a conversation with a regular customer. Opportunity knocked, or rather, hissed, in the form of a disconnected gas hose lying nearby. Karen didn't hesitate. She quickly pulled her minivan closer to Josh's car, masking her intentions. With practiced ease, she unscrewed the gas cap on his car and connected the loose hose to her minivan's fuel tank. The siphoning began, a slow, steady transfer of Josh's paid-for gasoline into her nearly empty tank. She worked quickly and efficiently, fueled by a combination of desperation and a twisted sense of entitlement. In her mind, she was merely taking what she deserved, righting some perceived injustice. This younger man driving a newer car shouldn't have the privilege of driving around while she was struggling. She told herself she would pay him back someday, but she knew in her heart that was an empty promise. As the minutes ticked by, Karen grew bolder, even glancing towards the minimart with a smirk, daring anyone to notice her illicit activity. She felt a surge of adrenaline, a dangerous cocktail of fear and exhilaration. The risk of being caught was overshadowed by the immediate gratification of filling her tank without spending a dime. She rationalized her actions, telling herself that Josh probably wouldn't even notice the missing gas. She was wrong. Emerging from the minimart, bottle of water in hand, Josh immediately noticed something was amiss. His gas cap was off. He hadn't left it off, he was sure of it. His eyes darted around, quickly assessing the situation. That's when he saw her, Karen Crawford, hunched over his car, a hose snaking from his gas tank into her dilapidated minivan. Shock turned to disbelief, then to a slow burn of anger. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. He walked purposefully towards her. "Excuse me. What do you think you're doing?" he demanded, his voice laced with incredulity. Karen froze, caught red-handed. Her eyes widened, a flicker of panic crossing her face. But the panic quickly hardened into defiance. She straightened up, pulling the hose out of her minivan and tossing it carelessly onto the ground. "I'm getting my gas back," she spat, her voice dripping with hostility. "You stole it from me." Josh stared at her, dumbfounded. "Stole it? What are you talking about? This is my car. I just paid for that gas." "Liar!" Karen shrieked, her voice rising in pitch. "You're the one stealing. I saw you. You probably stole this fancy car too." She pointed a finger accusingly at Josh. "You people always think you can just take what you want." Josh's anger intensified. He couldn't believe the audacity of this woman, accusing him of stealing after she'd been caught red-handed siphoning gas from his car. "Are you serious right now? I have the receipt right here. I just paid for the gas. You were literally stealing from me." He pulled the receipt from his pocket, waving it in her face. Karen brushed the receipt aside dismissively. "That's a fake. You probably printed it yourself. You think you can fool me? I know your kind. You're nothing but a thief." She then spat out a racial slur, the word dripping with venom. The air crackled with tension. Josh felt a surge of anger, but he fought to control himself. He knew that escalating the situation would only play into her hands. But he also knew he couldn't let her get away with this. "I'm calling the police," Josh stated firmly, pulling out his phone. Karen's eyes narrowed. "Go ahead. They'll believe me. You're the one committing a crime." She pulled out her own phone, her fingers trembling slightly as she dialed 911. "I want to report a theft. I'm at ESGO Gas. This man is stealing gas from my car. He's harassing me. He's being aggressive and making threats. And he's calling me names." Josh stared in disbelief as he listened to Karen's fabricated account. She was painting him as the aggressor, the thief, the perpetrator. He couldn't believe the audacity and the blatant manipulation. He started recording the encounter on his phone, knowing that the truth would be crucial in untangling this mess. "He's black, and he's being really aggressive." Karen continued, her voice rising hysterically. "I'm in fear for my safety. I think he's going to hurt me." Josh's jaw clenched. He knew exactly what she was doing. She was weaponizing her race and playing on stereotypes to manipulate the police and garner sympathy. The casual insertion of his race was a calculated move, designed to trigger implicit biases and paint him as a dangerous threat. It was a tactic as old as time, and it filled him with a profound sense of anger and frustration. He spoke calmly into his own phone with 911. "I'm calling to report a theft. A woman is siphoning gas from my car. I have video evidence of her committing the crime." When confronted, she began yelling racial slurs and is now falsely accusing me of theft and threatening her. Her name is Karen. She is the suspect, not me. The dispatcher on both lines struggled to maintain composure amidst the conflicting narratives. Josh stayed calm, even though chaos was ensuing around him. He knew that his calm demeanor would be his best weapon. The wail of sirens sliced through the air, signaling the arrival of the police. 2 patrol cars screeched to a halt in front of the gas station, their flashing lights casting an eerie glow on the scene. Two officers emerged, their faces grim, sizing up the situation. Karen immediately rushed towards them, her voice trembling with manufactured distress. "Officer! Thank God you're here. This man attacked me. He stole my gas, and when I confronted him, he started yelling at me and threatening me. I'm so frightened he's going to hurt me." She pointed dramatically at Josh, who stood calmly by his car, his phone still recording. The officers, a young female officer named Officer Davis, and a more seasoned male officer named Officer Miller, approached Josh cautiously. Officer Miller spoke first, his voice firm but neutral. "Sir, can you tell us what's going on here?" Josh calmly explained the situation, presenting his receipt and offering to show them the video he had recorded. He emphasized that he was the victim of a crime and that Karen was falsely accusing him. Officer Davis, having reviewed the 911 logs, seemed skeptical of Karen's claims. Officer Miller, still maintaining his neutrality, turned to Karen. "Ma'am, can you provide any evidence to support your claims?" Karen stammered, her story starting to unravel under the scrutiny of the police. She couldn't produce a receipt for gas, nor could she explain why a gas hose was connected to her car and Josh's. Her demeanor shifted from hysterical to defensive, her voice becoming shrill and accusatory. Officer Davis asked Karen if she willingly admitted to having a gas hose attached to her vehicle and to Josh's vehicle. Karen answered yes, she did attach the hose. Officer Miller excused himself to view the security camera footage inside the gas station minimart. After a few moments, Officer Miller emerged with a changed expression. He signaled to Officer Davis. Officer Miller pulled Karen aside, his voice low and serious. "Ma'am, we've reviewed the security footage. It clearly shows you siphoning gas from Mr. Cooper's car. We also heard you confess on camera. You're going to be arrested for theft and filing a false police report." Karen's face crumpled. Her carefully constructed facade crumbled, revealing the fear and desperation beneath. But he's, she stammered, unable to articulate her prejudiced accusations. Officer Davis placed Karen in handcuffs, leading her towards one of the patrol cars. As she was being led away, she glared at Josh, her eyes filled with hatred. "You haven't heard the last of this," she spat. Josh watched as the patrol car pulled away, a wave of relief washing over him. He was grateful that the police had seen through Karen's lies and that the truth had prevailed. But he was also deeply shaken by the experience. The casual racism, the blatant manipulation, and the potential consequences of Karen's actions had left him feeling vulnerable and angry. Officer Miller thanked Josh for his cooperation and apologized for the ordeal. He assured Josh that he would receive justice. In the days that followed, the incident went viral. Josh's video of the confrontation was shared widely on social media, sparking outrage and sparking a national conversation about racial bias and the weaponization of 911 calls. Karen Crawford faced public condemnation and legal consequences. While the incident left a scar, it also empowered Josh to become an advocate for racial justice. He joined local organizations, lending his voice and his experience to the fight against discrimination. The incident became a turning point in his life, transforming him from a software developer into an activist. He learned that even in the most mundane of circumstances, the fight for justice can unexpectedly erupt. The gas station incident served as a stark reminder that the fight for racial equality was far from over.